The Water Festival is in full swing, and Crabhammer is now in the permanent move pool for Kingler and Crawdaunt. If you haven't been following the news already, Crabhammer on Kingler makes Kingler the best water-type DPS currently in Pokemon Go. In this video, I'm going to help you unlock the deep mysteries of Crabhammer and understanding why Kingler is so good now. And I'll also be covering the PvP stats. So using the DPS TDO spreadsheet, you can see very clearly that Kingler now has the highest comprehensive DPS of all water-type Pokemon in the game with Crabhammer. And there's two reasons for this. Reason number one, Crabhammer is really good. If you look at Crabhammer's stats, we got 85 base power for 50 energy, and the move cooldown is 1.9 seconds. So combining these stats together, you can see that the DPS times DP, which is damage per second times damage per energy, which is a good general metric for determining the goodness of a charge move, Crabhammer is up there. It's like on the level of Meteor Mash. And if you pay closer attention, you'll see that as 85 base power compared to Hydro Cannon's 90 base power with the same cooldown. So if you think about it, Crabhammer is actually a slightly worse version of Hydro Cannon. So with that in mind, well, why aren't our Community Day Pokemon the best water types? Why aren't they surpassing Kyogre while this weaker Hydro Cannon named Crabhammer is? Well, the secret there lies with Kingler. If you check out the Pokemon list on Game Press, sort it by water-type Pokemon, and sort those water-type Pokemon by attack, you'll see that Kingler actually has a pretty good attack stat at 240. When you look at the Hydro Cannon Pokemon, we got Empoleon at 210 and Swampert at 208. And Gale is done outside. So how much does 30 base attack matter? Well, apparently it matters quite a deal because Kingler is now the best water-type DPS in Pokemon Go. Another thing you might notice about Kingler, in combination with this high attack stat, is that it is a little bit on the more frail side with only 146 HP and 181 defense. So how does this Kingler actually shape up against the other water type Pokemon in practice? Well, fortunately for you guys, I made a graph on that. So this is a predictive graph of the future Tier 5 Terrakion raid. We know what Terrakion's stats are. It's a Gen 5 legendary Pokemon if you're not in the loop here. But we know what its stats are. We don't know what moves it's going to get though. I'm pretty sure it's going to get a combination of rock, fighting, and ground type attacks, but we don't know specifically what those attacks are. But for the purposes of making a graph and showing off Kingler here, I decided to use a Rock Smash Close Combat Terrakion, using Best Friendship and no dodge. Up here you can see the rain boosted guys. Down here you can see the non-rain boosted guys. So starting out, looks like overall Meteor Mash Metagross is going to be the best option for this raid, assuming that we're not going to get hit with a bunch of ground type attacks, and Mewtwo with the flavorful Side Strike ain't too shabby either. As far as Kingler goes, Kingler is about on par with Machamp. So that's pretty good. Machamp is the premier fighting type Pokemon we all know and love, we got stockpiles of, and Kingler is basically on its level. Now as far as Kingler's tankiness or lack thereof goes, you can see that it's matching up with Dialga here. Dialga should be a good Terrakion counter if you're up against rock type attacks, but when it's getting hit by super effective damage, it's on the level of Kingler, which suggests that Kingler is on the level of a more solid Pokemon getting hit with super effective hits when it's just getting hit by neutral attacks. So that is where the tankiness or lack thereof comes in for the Kingler. So in general, compared to other water type Pokemon, I don't know if you can pick them out of this mess here. We got Swampert and the Kyogre. It is standing pretty tall compared to them in terms of DPS, but is behind in tankiness, which is TDO, total damage output. If you look at the rain boost, Swampert does start to get a leg up on the Kingler. Kingler still has the better DPS, but that tankiness and breakpoint shenanigans works in the favor of the Swampert, where it's like, yeah, you're losing a little bit of DPS, but look at that extra tankiness you got there. And this problem could be even worse for Kingler if you are up against rock type attacks, because Swampert resists rock with its ground typing. So overall, Swampert, not a bad water type. It is technically and in practice here looking like the best water type DPS in the game, but Swampert still pretty useful, and Kyogre is still tanky and useful as well. So you don't have to go too crazy on the Kinglers, but if you got a bunch of Krabby candies saved up, maybe you got a lucky Krabby from your trades with your friends, it's a pretty easily obtained Pokemon, not exclusive in any way, shape, or form. So no legendary status, no Hydro Cannon Community Day move status, so very awesome Pokemon. But what about Crawdaunt? Well, as far as the Scrap goes, I couldn't really include Crawdaunt because it's a Dark-type Pokemon, so it gets annihilated by the Fighting-type attacks, so it didn't do so well. Yeah, and in practice, it's always going to be behind Kingler. But if you come back to the comprehensive DPS TDO spreadsheet, you can see that Crawdaunt is pretty dang good. DPS on the level of Swampert and Kyogre, so definitely not a bad Pokemon, but Kingler obviously is the top crab, in raid content at least. When it comes to PvP, Crawdaunt has a couple tricks up its sleeves. So looking at the PvP stats of Crabhammer, we got 75 base power with a 50 energy cost. Problem with a 50 energy cost is that it's a little bit too slow for most Pokemon to really make that much of a difference. To make up for this, Crabhammer has an additional effect. It has a 1/8 chance of boosting the user's attack stat by 2 stages. Even if your opponent shields, you have that 1/8 chance of getting the boost. But as far as Kingler and Crawdaunt are concerned, that boost probably comes a little bit too late with the 50 energy cost. So overall, it really isn't doing a whole lot for these Pokemon, especially when you look at Crawdaunt. It's got Bubble, Night Slash, comes out way faster, and both these Pokemon have relatively high attack stats, so in Great League and Ultra League PvP, they really aren't really it. Yeah, but PvPoke did point out on the Twitterverse that Crawdaunt does have some swag in the Twilight Cup. If you remember back to my old Twilight Cup content, Crawdaunt was one of the premier Dark-type Pokemon because it's a Dark-type that uses attacks that aren't Dark-type. So Crabhammer could be a little bit of an extra spice to help out Crawdaunt be that much better should the Twilight Cup have a reprise. Yes, Night Slash and Bubble Beam are faster charge moves, but all you need is Night Slash to have that speed, and then Crabhammer to bring the hammer on your opponents, and then 1/8 of the time, it's going to be just phenomenal, and your waterfalls are going to be insane-o damage because you got the boost. So, should the Twilight Cup have a reprise, Crawdaunt could be a bit better than it was before, but I don't think Crawdaunt is moving from a good option to a must-have option. It's just a good option that has a little bit of extra spice to it now, but not that significant. Overall, Crabhammer in PvP, not really happening, and it really isn't making these Pokemon all that better. So there you have it, Crabhammer. On Kingler, in raid content, it is now the highest DPS water-type attacker in the game. And on top of that, it is the most, unexclusive water-type attacker in the game as well. Kyogre, legendary Pokemon. If you don't have it, you have to trade for it, and even if you get it, it's a huge investment. And then Swampert needs Hydro Cannon, which is a Community Day exclusive attack. So for most players, Kingler is now going to be the go-to water-type attackers in many raids. And it's not going to be a bad thing. It's going to be a good thing. Kingler is freaking awesome. Now when it comes to Crawdaunt not too far behind Kingler, but the dark typing, maybe it works against it. In my Tracheon graph, it definitely did. And then as far as PvP is concerned, the attack really doesn't make anything too awesome for these two Pokemon. Crawdaunt already had a niche use in the Twilight Cup, and the inclusion of Crabhammer doesn't really make it all that more deadly because it's such a slow charge move. 50 energy cost in PvP is like a million years to actually launch your attack. So yeah, I don't see it making big waves in PvP. Overall, I'm glad that it's in the permanent move pool so people don't have to stress out about it, right? So maybe if you're a great leaguer, keep your eyes out for the right core fish to evolve into the right Crawdaunt. And if you're into raid content, keep your eyes peeled for those Crabbies. Maybe try to get those lucky trades in because now you're going to have this explosive Mondo, Crabhammer, and water type attacker. And that's it. If you like this content, you want to see more like it, maybe you want to know about Psystrike Mewtwo, well, make sure to subscribe to SwagTips. And if you got any questions on this content, comment below, let me know what's up, and I'll be happy to help you out.